What's going on, guys? I'm Tyler, and to continue my brand new series of classic movie reviews, I'm here to let you know that Dial M for Murder is no perfect movie. And Dial M for Murder is about a former tennis player named Tony, played by Ray Milland, who is conspiring to murder his unfaithful wife, played by Grace Kelly. So he blackmails a small time criminal, played by Anthony Dawson, to commit the crime. But as the smallest things go wrong, Milland has to continuously change the plan without getting caught in the process. And a fun little fact, this movie was actually filmed in 3D because it was made during what was considered the golden era of 3D film, since that was the time where it seemed so brand new and revolutionary and innovative, and supposedly would change the filmmaking industry forever. Thing is, the golden era of 3D movies was 1952 to 1954, and as Alfred Hitchcock himself put it, it was a 9-day wonder and he came in on day 9. So, if anyone has seen Dial M for Murder in 3D, it was probably during a few revivals that took place in the 1980s and 2010s. There's a 3D Blu ray that's for sale. And I gotta be honest, I wouldn't have guessed that it was made in 3D had I not known this fact going in, because outside of a few shots of characters reaching their hands out towards the camera where you can tell those shots were meant to be in 3D, it's not a Friday the 13th Part 3 or a Jaws 3D or even a Spy Kids 3D scenario where fucking everything is up close in the camera. So it almost seems like Hitchcock himself knew for a fact that this fad wasn't going to fly. But in any case, it still has the Alfred Hitchcock trademarks that you would expect from him as a director. Whenever he can, he likes to put the story in a single location in order to increase the tension. And since the majority of this story takes place at Ray Milland's house, you become less aware of the overall location and more focused on the characters and their reactions as they're figuratively and literally in a tight spot. Because they're stuck in this location for a certain amount of time, you never know what's going to happen when they try to hide evidence or plant some within this one location, because you know where everything is. You know how small of a space they're in, so you have no idea whether or not a character is going to walk in on them and discover them in the process. Which, of course, is elevated by the fact that Hitchcock uses a lot of longer takes of characters discussing their plans or trying to go from one room to another to either look for evidence or hide it. And those longer takes make you anticipate whether or not somebody's going to walk in on them or whether someone's going to call them out for supposedly lying to them. And it definitely helps that the performances in this movie are also really well done, especially Ray Milland as Tony. I'm surprised when people talk about Alfred Hitchcock villains, they don't think of Ray Milland from Dial M for Murder, because he does have the usual Hitchcock tropes in regards to a Hitchcockian villain. He is very rich and high up, and he's so handsome, charming, charismatic that no one would instantly suspect him as a murderer. But whenever he's discussing his motives and his agendas to the blackmail victim, the best scene in particular is this what feels like 20-minute long scene of just him and the blackmail victim talking to each other. And through his facial expressions and his line delivery, he shows a side to him that his closest friends and relatives know nothing about him. He's incredibly sly and sneaky and despicable, but very quietly calm and confident about his plans, which gives you the impression that he spent a lot of time thinking about how to execute this plan perfectly, as well as showing you how personal this motivation is as to why he thinks this crime has to be committed. But whenever he's all alone in a certain room, or if he's looking the other way from anybody else, we do see the fear in his eyes that he knows he's missed something, he just doesn't know what. And even Anthony Dawson is also fairly good as the blackmail victim. As soon as he's caught in a situation or when he's initially being blackmailed, he's very quick to offer a rebuttal or a question to counter people's suspicions and just say, if you're blackmailing me, what's stopping me from going to the police? He throws a lot of these ulterior motivations that show that he's a very experienced criminal and that he's used to coming up with a quick plan under pressure. But whenever he's very late to give a reply or just gives no reply at all, it's a sign of weakness. It's not like Milland, where him showing silence is him being very cold and calculating and very improvisational in regards to committing a murder. With Dawson, he only does small time crimes that rely on building people's confidence. He's never had to do anything physical. So you can see the fear in his eyes as he's executing this plan, and he is not anticipating anything to go wrong because he's never been in a situation like this before. So the best scenes for me in particular are the scenes just between Milland and Dawson in this cat and mouse battle of wits to decide who really has the brains and who's willing to execute this properly. A lot of people say that Grace Kelly gives one of her career best performances, and I can't really say for sure because I haven't seen that many. I have seen her in Vertigo, and I liked her in Vertigo, but no, wait, that's not. Wasn't her? I don't know. Hitchcock hires a lot of blondes. I'm sorry. But at the same time, I'm not really sure that she really was that good of a character or even gave that good of a performance, because at the beginning of the movie, she does have a lot of secrets. She is an unfaithful person, and you do see moments of her and her lover contemplating what they're going to do, not knowing that her husband is already aware of the affair. That was her at her most interesting because she has to portray a lot of emotions. She has to portray a lot of fear, but also optimism whenever she's around her husband. But as the movie goes on and she becomes in a much more dangerous situation than anyone would have expected, because that's another great thing about this movie. It's incredibly unpredictable because of how many times the initial murder plan has to keep changing. There are so many dangerous situations that everyone would just start screaming and sobbing and raising their voice at everything. But Grace Kelly wasn't that kind of actress. She was very soft-spoken, and her soft-spokenness didn't really work in some scenes, especially during the last third where she should absolutely be terrified, but just looking at her face, I thought she was bored half the time, and I didn't really buy into that. And that was the one big issue with this movie, the last third. The last third has to have a huge element of cat and mouse between Milland, between his wife, Grace Kelly's lover, and this one cop who shows halfway through to start asking questions towards everybody and is outwardly suspicious towards everyone due to the nature of his job. And I will say this. The overall mystery of the movie is discovering how or even if this guy is going to get caught trying to kill his wife, or if someone else is going to get the blame for it and is going to get framed. But I will say this, the last half hour revolves around a ton of exposition and explaining how this cat and mouse game is going to work that I didn't really think is necessary because it involves a lot of technical terms, it involves a lot of deus ex machinas where it's just like, oh, well, I interviewed this one suspect and they said this, or they had this one object or piece of evidence that could prove someone else's innocence that I just felt was completely out of left field, and it didn't really have the almost stage play like element of the rest of the movie, because Dial M for Murder is kind of like Rope. It takes place mostly in one location, it's based off of a play, and you can really get that vibe. But it has the same problems with stage plays in one location, where you have to give copious amounts of exposition about events, about evidence, about characters that we never see or know about until it's suddenly revealed. So it goes from being this contained thriller to almost this procedural type of movie that the overall tonal shift felt a little out of left field and it felt a little boring. But outside of that, Dial M for Murder is an underrated Hitchcock movie that any film fan should really seek out. It is incredibly well acted. Hitchcock did a really good job directing. One other technique about his direction that I forgot to mention is that there are a lot of overhead and God's eye views of the characters, almost like we're spying on them as they're conspiring to commit crimes. That was another really good technique to increase the tension. And even though it was meant to be 3D but wasn't filmed in it, it works perfectly fine as a 2D movie. It's not distracting like, again, Friday the 13th or Jaws 3D or even Texas Chainsaw or Spy Kids, because those were incredibly obnoxious about the 3D. And overall, Dial M for Murder, even if your heart isn't pounding at the level of suspense, your eyes are always on screen because it's a constant battle of wits and battle of words between the various characters. It was a really good time to watch, and for all those reasons, I'm going to give Dial M for Murder a 4 out of 5. Guys, thanks as always for watching. If you have seen Dial M for Murder, let me know in the comments below what you thought of it. Let me know what some of your favorite Alfred Hitchcock movies are, because I'm going to be covering some that people have heard of, but others that people that most Hitchcock fans might not have even seen. I've gotten a fair bit of recommendations from my buddy Josh because he's a big fan of Marnie. I will definitely be reviewing Marnie for sure. But yeah, let me know in the comments below what you thought. Be sure to stay tuned for more classical movie reviews, and be sure to like and subscribe. Take care.